All right, everyone. Looks like a few more folks are joining us as we speak, but we will jump right into it and get right on with the subject and topic for today. So today we are talking about confronting cyber risk and really talking about how One Bank adopted biometrics to move away from passwords and really modernize their authentication program. We'll get into the content in just 1 minute. I do have a little bit of housekeeping up front just to let you know. Everyone is in listen-only mode. We will be emailing the recording to you afterwards, but also make sure that you use the questions panel to submit any questions that you have throughout today's session. We have a great guest presenter with us and really excited to have it be an interactive session for all of you on the line. So with that, I am joined today by a new BioKey customer, Orange Bank and Trust Company, who recently took that initiative to modernize their authentication and use identity-bound biometrics to move away from passwords. And so with me today is Kathy Pinto, VP of Information Technology, and Josh Crespo, Technical Specialist from Orange Bank and Trust. And so Kathy and Josh, I'll turn it over to you for a few minutes just to have you introduce yourselves to the audience.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Okay, this is Kathy speaking. As Kim said, I am the Vice President of Information Technology here at the bank. I'll give you a little information about Orange Bank and Trust first. We are located in Orange County, New York. We are primarily more of a commercial bank. Our asset size is just over $2.2 billion. I have to be honest, I didn't realize. I lost a little gap there, so that's good to know. From a branch perspective, we have 15 current branches. We have 1 to 2 more coming up this year. Definitely 1, 2 is a possibility. Have to be honest, I've been here for about 6 years, excuse me, and we are really on a growth pattern right now. We have over 200 employees. As I said, we are commercially focused. It's not to say that we don't have, the old traditional consumer walk-in traffic, but most of our newer branch locations are more so like a buzz-in type. They're usually more lenders, relationship management, not the traditional teller line anymore. So that is really where our growth model is. We are a little bit north of New York City in Orange County. So for those of you who didn't know where that is, so we're about an hour and 15 minutes north of New York City. So a lot of our growth is bordering in that area, in the Westchester, New York area, and even touching a little bit into the Bronx. So for myself, I have been in the bank, as I alluded. I've been here just over 6 years. It's been very exciting and interesting. We have done a lot of changes in the bank since I've been here, so happy to report, from outsourcing our core processing, migrating off our core processor, changing so much of our technology. But I have a fantastic team, so I take no credit. I owe it to Josh and his peers. So with that, I will turn it over to Josh just to give you a little intro as to Josh himself.
Hi, everyone. So yes, I am Joshua Crespo. I've been with the company for almost 3 years now in April, and I have a degree in cybersecurity, but I handle the network security here. It's a little different. I also handle the rollout of BioKey to about 250 devices, and outside of that, I pretty much handle all the little day-to-day things that go on here outside of those major big issues. So all those changes have been, I want to say a good amount of them have been kind of recent, and we've been rolling along. So it's been a process.
Yep, even all through COVID.
Yeah, you had a lot.
I'm sure you all feel that same way. So.
And I remember, Kathy, when we were first talking, you had a lot of change. And so when I asked you, what's up in 2022, you're like, take a break or catch your breath a little bit, just because you've had so many major shifts
Absolutely.
in modernizing.
Right. For any of you who are in, who have a outsourced core processor, just as an FYI, we just migrated off of FIS to Fiserv. That may mean something to some folks. Mm-hmm. Big undertaking we just completed in November. So it literally took us over a year. So we are, as Kim said, we're going to relax a little bit, just a little though.
Just a little bit, right? And right. More to come. And so we're getting right into, today's conversation is definitely more around cyber. unfortunately, with that theme of trying to lay back or at least take a little breather, my first slide doesn't help with that, right, Kathy? It's a very pressurized environment when we're looking at banking in general and financial industry in general. And so I'm going to tee up a little bit of the conversation, and then we'll get right into exactly the details of how Kathy and Josh went about changing and modernizing their authentication program. And so, out there, you're experiencing this firsthand, but to kind of summarize, we're seeing a lot of pressure, I think is the best way to put it, where there's digital transformation, as the great buzz term, is coined, but really this customer experience is coming up saying, customers are experiencing more or wanting more products, wanting a better personalized experience, more mobile, more website, right? These buzz in, buzz out kind of branches. And so it's changing how financial institutions are really operating. But when it comes to cyber attacks, it's just a high level of pressure. And so banking industry, we've seen a disproportionate amount of attacks. This is one of those crazy percentages, right? 13-18% increase in ransomware year over year. So very short time period where we've seen just a dramatic increase in cyber attacks. Also, regulations are getting tighter, now 36 hours to report any significant data breach. And then, of course, our favorite subject has also become cyber insurance, with cyber insurers really pushing for greater controls and also just raising premiums, right? That risk model for them really got thrown out of whack when we were looking at cyber attacks. So lots of pressure. When we start talking about kind of our subject for today in terms of authentication program and modernizing it, multi-factor authentication goes without saying at this point that it really does a great job preventing attacks, reports up to 90%, for example, against ransomware, and continues to be recommended by regulators, government agencies, and experts. I have a few examples here that I found pretty interesting. One of the most timely and obviously relevant to our events over the past few weeks is with CISA, a branch of obviously Homeland Security, who has stood up this Shields Up program in response to the possible cyber threats because of the Russian attack on Ukraine. And so the Shields Up program, it's a great program. Please Google it, check it out. They've done a nice job summarizing everything. And right at the top of the list for how to prevent a damaging cyber intrusion is to put multi-factor authentication on remote, privileged, and administrative access. I also would advocate you should really at this point have multi-factor on all accounts and all access points. So that is something that's very timely, just came out last week, towards the middle of last week. And then the one that's really relevant to the financial industry is the FFIEC, as we know very well in this market, right? And OCC actually issued a new authentication and access guidance or bulletin, as they call it, in August of 2021. And so the interesting part about this is it is adapted to take into consideration the difference in threat landscape, like I said before, and there's the expansion of access points that hackers can get in through. The other part of their bulletin that really stands out, and a lot of why it's influencing banks just like Kathy and Josh's to move to different authentication methods, is that the ones that we had or controls we had, let's say even a few years ago, 5 years ago, et cetera, are not sufficient to defend against these attacks and sophisticated attacks, right? Bad guys are always adapting, always coming up with great new ways to get into the defenses. And so what we wanted to highlight from a bank perspective, right, is there's very unique workflows that we come across all the time that require unique authentication. And so some of these are highlighted here, right? Like we, by security policy, don't allow phones in the branch or at a workstation. So all phone-based factors like a one-time passcode or something would not be allowed, let's say, in a branch. We have remote employees. That presents its own challenges. Or wanting to authenticate customers but still give them that great experience. And then having employees that are really, we call them roaming, but moving from branch location to branch location. And so the highlight here really from the BioKey perspective is that we have a lot of banks, just like Orange Bank and Trust, coming to us saying, hey, we need a better solution. We're okay having those traditional factors, but how do we actually accommodate these unique workflows within our organization and not to have to have 6 different authentication vendors. And so our identity-bound biometrics really stand out for that. They're the only way to positively identify the human behind the transaction, not just a device or a key or a password. Really, truly, the individual person is what's authenticated. And what's great about that is it also is something that you don't have to carry or remember, and is really easy to implement a fingerprint scanner at every single workstation, for example, so that you can support those roaming users. Really convenient. You maintain control over who is actually enrolled and who is gaining access. And we also have it on a mobile app that makes it great for customers. So with that, we're going to dive into the use case at Orange Bank and Trust. They have definitely done a great job with deployment. We'll get into that, but using this identity-bound biometrics as a key part of the authentication strategy. So Kathy and Josh, we'll go back to you and start kind of at a very high level, just to also reiterate some of the challenges that you're having at your bank in particular, that you're noticing in the industry. So what are some of your top cyber concerns and priorities?
Well, of course, we're always concerned about, the big ones, ransomware, phishing, somebody getting into the environment. Those are always topmost in our minds. But I will have to say our board is pretty well versed, sometimes to my dismay, in some cyber information. They are particularly concerned constantly over ransomware. So we do have, very frank discussions with our board. We have an information security officer. It's actually a virtual ISO for us. He's not on staff, but he meets with them regularly as well, as do I. So we do spend a lot of time talking about ransomware. We do spend a lot of time discussing about if something gets into the environment, some type of malware, virus. What is our next step? Like, do we have the right staff in place to handle that? Do we have, as you mentioned earlier, Kim, the insurance? How is our cyber insurance policy? Is it geared towards what we need should something happen? So it's constantly changing. As we all know, the only thing we truly know is that something is going to change. It's very hard to stay on top of all of it. And I'm very thankful to have the ISO and someone like Josh on the team, because Josh is a security-minded individual. Probably more so than I am at times. So one of my top cybersecurity concerns is our internal end users, our internal employees. A lot of them, they're in high pressure situations or they're with a client, and are they stopping and thinking about what they're doing before they do something? So they could be, moving around too quickly, clicking on something they should not be. So it's always protecting to make sure that only we are on the system, of course, and then if they're on the system, that we give them enough tools and training. We do a lot of security awareness to make sure that they understand the ramifications of what they're doing. And if they have an issue, to speak up quickly. Please don't hide it. We don't want someone to click on something and then not tell us till several hours later or so on, or something weird popped up on that screen. So.
Or forward it to their friends and say, did you see this email link? That's my favorite response that I hear. And I know, Kathy, I think you mentioned, that response plan, from a cyber perspective, I can't stress enough also, right? It's kind of, unfortunately, that, not if, but when is the coin term, right? Yep. And how quickly can you recover? Just out of curiosity, do you do any type of like tabletop exercises, like going through that scenario, or is it mainly like at the board level, just kind of talking through who's responsible for what at that level?
I would say all of the above. We do talk at the board level. They do ask me about that. We do our actual test, of course. We do 2 disaster recovery tests a year. One we do with our end users, so that we ask the different departments to participate to ensure that when we recover the systems, that they work to their specifications. And then we always do one just for IT ourselves. So if we want to make any changes or do a deeper dive into some issue or new technology we want to try. But we also do tabletop. In fact, right before we did our conversion to Fiserv, our information security officer led a tabletop exercise on a Fiserv outage. So if our core was out, how we would handle it. And it went over a period of like 4 or 5 days. It was very interesting because we weren't really on the tool yet and we were just learning it.
Mm-hmm.
So it helped us to see a lot of questions that we could ask our new partner. And we do also participate at FS ISAC's annual
Yep.
CAP training as well. So
Oh, fantastic.
we
Yeah,
are going to try and do more of the incident response tabletops. We say that every year. I'm sure everybody can relate. We want to do them more often, at least twice a year. I mean, optimally quarterly, but there's always something coming up. But we do try and stay on those too.
Right. Yeah, they're challenging to schedule. I just did one actually for county government at an event, and it was an election security. If there's a snowstorm, you can't get the polling machines there, and someone just had ransomware, and it was quite the experience. But it's reality, and I think that's really important. And then Josh, anything to add there for you from as Kathy mentioned, for our audience, Josh, you had a networking start to your education and then ended up transferring to a cybersecurity degree. But what type of concerns or priorities do you have as well, or echo what Kathy said?
I would say one of our largest ones, at least something that I've noticed, is it's typically something with the end users. Like Kathy said, they're in high pressure situations a lot, so we end up having to check them on certain things. So I've gone out of my way a lot of the times I don't want to say put extra education onto someone, but that's the best way to really put it, is when they're in that scenario, hey, the next time you're here, I'm going to need you to do this instead. It has worked for us, but it's always going to be an ongoing issue, I would say. So we're working on it. I don't think there's a company out there that can't say that they're not going to work on it, because there's always going to be new employees or older employees that, hey, I don't remember you showing this to me 4 times before. So it's going to always be an ongoing process, but that's usually the biggest security problem, because everywhere else, it's a small IT team here, so we try to keep a tight ship. So it's just a matter of making sure everybody else follows the same rules.
Very true.
Yeah, people are the weakest security link, as we know. Admittedly, I own up to it. Yeah,
I do too.
Yep. We all are responsible. We are the walking weakest link. So, well, great. That's a great setting to the stage, for kind of that cyber priority. And so, as we've talked about and kind of hinted towards, one of the main security priorities I know that you had was really looking to improve and better your authentication program. And so let's start a little bit about where you were before you started looking to improve your program. What authentication do you have in place? Did you have in place? And then what caused you to start looking for MFA and biometrics?
Well, I would say what we had prior to BioKey was nothing. Josh is kind of laughing, he's smiling, but even our password, I'll be honest, even our password constraints 2 years ago were not the strongest as they could be. We've recently, we've changed them within the last 18 months or so to, actually, I think it's 12 characters, probably should go up to 15. So basically, we were really relying on passwords only. Stronger passwords, we were having them changed every 90 days at that point.
It was 90 days, now we're bumped up to 6 months for 12 characters.
Right. But that was all we were using at the time. But as I previously mentioned, our information security officer, he's very versed in looking at the future. He's very strategic, which is very helpful. So we do have a cyber strategic plan. And we've talked about, him and I, for probably close to a little over 2 years, saying we should start looking at multi-factor. Let's get ahead of this. We are regulated, of course. It's not mandated. We are a New York State bank, so they highly suggest it, but it wasn't mandated. But we wanted to get ahead of it. And it just seemed that everything that came up from an audit perspective, had we had some type of multi-factor authentication, we could have let the auditors know. We wouldn't have been concerned on that because we had MFA in place. So we have, in my opinion, and his as well, we have strong controls in place. But adding MFA was kind of like the icing on the top for us. So it's been on our strategic plan, and then because of the regulations, it just seemed the right thing to do.
Fantastic. And Josh, anything to add there as well, from your perspective, or looking at systems, what you were kind of starting to look for from MFA?
So as far as what we were looking for MFA, Kathy and I went back and forth a lot about the different ways to do MFA, and I kind of lost that battle more than once.
Yeah.
Because for Kathy's point, you can't exactly lose your finger,
Right.
likely anyway. So it's just a matter of making sure that we can get that MFA in there. So other than that, it was just figuring out what was going to be best for us. And the being able to scan fingerprints is definitely our best case scenario, because Kathy proved right to her to her knowledge. She did prove right, and a lot of users just had issues with having to, oh, do I have to bring something else now? Oh, am I going to have to bring my phone? Why do I have to install something on my phone? So a lot of users, when they heard that they were going to just go with a fingerprint scanner, it just made life a lot easier.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, we call it traditional MFA versus, our identity-bound biometrics, and we offer all of it, but we're just, and mainly because it's become mainstream to provide a phone or like use a phone to do something. And so there's amazing studies out there where even though I have a phone, you probably have smartphones, there's a lot of the population out there that don't. And on top of that, there's even regulations now where you have to pay for the employee's phone plan if you're going to be sending them one-time passcodes via SMS. And so so it's a big challenge. I think, the part that stands out to me too, like you said, the convenience of just scanning your fingerprint very quickly. And then the part that I would highlight also is consider what you're trusting, right? Where if you're saying, okay, I'm going to allow a one-time passcode to a phone and that's going to authenticate, you really have no trust established with the person holding that phone, or that the person that originally was holding that phone is still them. And so that's the other consideration in biometrics is the way that we do biometrics, and with the identity bound, it really is the only method that's going to prove the person is there completing the transaction, which we've seen be pretty critical when you're trying to figure out what methods where, which is, I think, one of the hardest parts about putting MFA out there with all the options.
Agreed. Yeah. Really, for us, it was about the convenience of the biometric.
Correct.
But the security of the biometric was still secondary. Not secondary. It was still high up in our thought process as well.
Yeah, and I think that goes to, and we'll talk about this a little later on, is like that change management, right? Where you're coming out and saying, okay, we're going to go change your experience to your employee or your bank president or your board, right? These people that have daily tasks. And so the first priority is like, how do we do this without really disrupting them? Or like you said, giving them something else to carry or using their phone. And so the first step usually is just for the acceptance to consider the convenience. And so that's definitely a top priority, I think, in most of the deployments I hear. It's just, on the trust side for you as an organization, what are you giving them? And so that's definitely great to hear. And like you said, you landed on the convenience of the fingerprint. But let's dive into that a little bit more. The convenience, we covered the reasons that drove you to require that biometric authentication. But I think, Josh, you were the one doing the evaluating of the solutions that you looked at. What did you find once you started going to some of the more, big name brands? And Kathy, if you're part of that evaluation too, but what did you find when you started to go out there looking for biometrics?
So when I was dealing with other providers for the multi-factor, whenever I mentioned biometrics, this is where my boss wants to go. I'm not winning this.
Okay.
We want a scanner directly to the PC. Everyone was baffled. It was actually like confused. We don't offer anything like that. You could get our app, and the app will do it, but no one had any idea that you could get a device, even on their website. If they had a third party that supported something, they still had no idea what I was talking about. And in the middle of one of our meetings, I was like, I don't understand how you don't know what I'm talking about. I could Google something right now. I Googled it, and the exact BioKey, like I think it's like the third tab on your webpage where it actually shows the devices.
Mm-hmm.
That site came up, and I'm like, look, I'm looking at it right now, and they even say they support like integrating with you guys, and they absolutely had no clue. So right after that phone call, I just saw your phone number at the bottom of that list, and I was like, I need to call them because this is obviously where we need to go.
And I should add to that too, and I don't think I mentioned this before to you, Kim. When we were going through our evaluating our core providers, and we were meeting with Fiserv, when they came on site to do the product demo, they all had palm scanners, for biometrics. And
Oh,
everybody in our boardroom went, oh, and IT turned around and went, no, because we just had envisions of having to hold people's hands and keep it steady. And it honestly, they offer that as part of our contract, that solution. I don't even know if I told that part to Josh. It was quite expensive.
Yep.
Not exactly where we wanted to be because I thought the mice themselves would end up being very problematic in the long run. But it also kind of introduced it. A lot of folks that saw the demo looked around and said, wow, that is so much easier to do than have to pull out my phone and do it. They kind of liked it. So it
Yep.
kind of helped lead the way for us. And then, as Josh said, when he uncovered BioKey, it was exactly what we were looking for. So it was just like a win-win for us. We were, the acknowledgement that we needed to do this was starting, and here was the tool we needed to do. And the fingerprint I thought was the most convenient and economical for us. So just like a perfect win.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because I see like Fiserv's main business isn't authentication, right? Isn't necessarily IAM. And so I've seen some vendors include that and everything else.
Right.
But what happens is too, then all they have is palm. So that's the other thing too, is when, like you have biometrics, but you also, and we'll, again, kind of leading into what we're going to talk about, but you also have Authenticator as a backup method because you can't do, the coin phrase is one size does not fit all, right? That it doesn't do it that way. And it is interesting, Josh, that your experience with that. I was curious to hear if any of the big logos out there that do MFA were like, oh no, we have biometrics, we have Touch ID, right? And so that's become kind of a misconception too, where Touch ID is still just sending an encrypted key. There's no control that you can actually verify the original person enrolled in that device is the person that they are. And so it's interesting that there really is a unique need for it. It works well, but most of the big name brands out there aren't really or don't provide it at this point. And then I know that you've been working with the team. Talk a little bit about what the initial, engagement with us was like. I think you had mentioned that kind of stood out to you as well, Kathy.
Yeah, I liked when Josh kind of connected with BioKey and he got me on one of the first few calls. I liked the easiness of working with BioKey originally. It was, oh, okay, you guys want to give this a try? Yeah, let's do proof of concept. I'm going to send you scanners. We had them in a couple of days. Everything we asked for was very easy up front. It really was. It really made it so hard to say no, to be perfectly honest. I'm going to let Josh talk to it more so, but I was impressed from, I deal with so many different vendors. We all make so many decisions on which vendor to go with. And it was just such a positive upfront experience that I was like, yeah, Josh, let's continue. Let's see how far we can go. And honestly, it was turned around really quickly. I don't know, Josh, you should add because you're the one who actually spoke with them more than I did.
Yeah, I'll say the first call was definitely, okay, what do you guys do? Show me how it actually works when you're signing into a computer. I just had a bunch of questions, and they were like, hey, you know what? We can send you a couple scanners, and we'll set it up. We'll start another call, set up a server for you guys. You guys can just see if it works for you. And we did have some issues in the beginning, but getting in contact with that same person was, I want to say, close to flawless as possible. He responded to me within a couple hours. At most, it might have been a day. Any little issue we resolved on that call. I believe there was one problem where he had never seen it before. He got back to me the next morning. I had figured it out, and it's something that he implemented for other customers. So it's just, everything was so seamless, and he was just willing to work on every aspect of it.
Excellent. Yeah, and we definitely take pride in giving that firsthand experience. Some of these larger providers in IAM or even just certain identity stores, I'll put it that way, it's very hard to get support, and it is very hard to get in contact. We take a lot of pride in the fact that if you're going to call or contact our team, they're all locally based to our organization and usually are part of the development team or have hands on the product. So really, really important, because I think the other thing to acknowledge is that I have yet to see one environment exactly like the other. There's always some kind of structure difference, whether it's an app that's legacy, whether it's a different AD structure. It inevitably comes up that something has to be customized, and that's definitely the wheelhouse that we're in. And so, wrapping up kind of the storyline, what about the launch plan? So, you are, and I actually have it incorrect, Kathy, I apologize. I think you said 15 branches.
Correct. Yep.
That you're at, and I think it's just, you've been adding a lot. So counting all of them is an ongoing basis. But talk a little bit about where you're at with launch today, how far you've gotten, and how that experience has been.
You want me to go first, Stephanie? Okay, I would say we are 99.9% complete.
Fantastic.
There is possibly 3 or 4 individuals in the bank that have not been fingerprinted. Unfortunately, one of them is our president, so we will have it done shortly. I'll be honest, we wanted to make sure everything was perfect before we went to him, and now it's just a matter of getting on his calendar. So we did start our deployment, crazily enough, in the middle of our core conversion. We started really hot and heavy with it in November, right as we were going live. I tasked Josh with getting out to all of our branches, and they are geographically dispersed in many cases. So getting out the fingerprint scanners to all the branches ahead of time. And then in some cases, we were able to go back to that location and do the actual scanning process. And Josh will talk to how we pushed out the software. In other cases, we knew we had some folks in those branch locations which are tech savvy enough that they could actually, it's easy enough to set up somebody in BioKey that they could handle that for us. We didn't always need to be there. Everybody kind of knows those those employees or those internal users that need to be handheld and those that don't. So we were fortunate to have that. I tasked Josh with trying to get it done by the end of the year. Unfortunately, being in the New York area with COVID hitting again, it did delay us a little bit more than we'd like to. But as I said, once we were able to get back out to our locations, we really were rolling along quite well. Josh suggested, and I thought it was a great idea, that every employee uses the authenticator as a backup method on their personal cell phone. But to Kim's point earlier, we actually found, I think it was 2 individuals that didn't have a phone that could actually do the authenticator or refused because they weren't being paid. And that is in the event if they need the one-time passcode. We've let them know. If not, you can always call here to IT and we can help you. But we wanted to be as self-service as possible. But I will say it was very easy to get people to scan their fingers. It's interesting to watch, so that's always entertaining. So that kind of kept them happy. And people wanted to see how fast theirs went through and which finger did you use. It got a lot of buzz, which was kind of nice.
Fun. Yep.
But Josh, do you want to add, how you pushed out the software? And
yeah, so we actually have a tool for pushing out software to machines throughout the network. And the person that helped me with the install was actually very familiar with the tool. It was part of our ticket, so he just came in saying, oh, this is what you have. Let me take a look. We set up the package together. He made sure that he did set up a package of just the installer. So if I wanted to, I could just push it onto a desktop and then actually run it manually. But we were able to get it work with our other piece of software, and just the rollout was super simple. I think the longest one took maybe 10 minutes, and it was one of those, really far away PCs. So it could have just been a network issue at that point. So the ones in this building, not even 3 minutes, PC reboots, and the person's able to just sign right in. So we didn't really have a lot of problems with the actual rollout, just more of those, like the individuals who didn't have smartphones. And like I said before, we're kind of a small IT department, so we didn't want our 200 plus, employees calling us whenever there was I can't get in, the scanner, got unplugged, and now it's asking me for an OTP. Well, I have other calls to take, and I need you to crawl back under your desk and replug in the scanner. So it's a lot easier to have people have that backup.
Right. Yep. Which was very appealing to us as part of the solution. Very appealing.
And that's a good clarifying point too, where so our portalware platform is cloud-based. We have, I don't know, we're over maybe 20 factors at this point. We can integrate all kinds. And then specifically for this use case, you had a desktop login is where you were using this. So the client side is then required. So, but that's fantastic. Over 200 desktops. I know we talked about that. And like we said, always have an authenticator of some kind as a backup, whether that's a phone or hardware challenge questions. We even have pattern-based if someone wants to draw a pattern. So there's all kinds of backups, but that's tremendous. And I think the other thing that stands out to me about this story is just how quickly it happened, because November till now is really not that much time, especially with how much you had to roll out. So tremendous job with a small IT team, and just happy, to be able to support the effort. So.
Right, and COVID and the holiday season.
And COVID and holidays, we just, conquered the world.
Exactly.
And so I do want to, wrap up. We talked about this as kind of lessons learned. So what advice do you have for our audience as they start thinking about improving or even considering biometrics for their authentication program?
I think the first thing is to get buy-in from your senior management and or your board, depending, if it comes from the top down, that's always helpful. And it was for us. As I said, our board is pretty versed. They are actually have been looking forward to it. They don't log into our network, but they've been looking forward to seeing how it all works. So they ask questions a lot. So having the senior management and the board buy-in was tremendous to help us move along. Then I think after that is just the education. We talked about a lot. Anytime I could mention it to somebody, I did. We also used as part of our security awareness training right before we went live. I ensured that we pushed out a training on biometrics. So it was that month's security topic as well. So we tried to put a lot of buzz around it, and I think that helped. And we tried to let people know it, the reasoning why. It was for our security as a bank, for them personally. We always try and remind our staff that when we think about security, try and also translate it into their personal lives as well. Whether we're talking about phishing email or worrying about biometrics, are you using, how do you open your phone? Just we try and make it as personal as possible for their buy-in as well. So I think that helped us to improve it. And then, of course, just getting the right partner. For us, getting the right partner with BioKey really helped us tremendously. We did our research. We felt we found the right partner, and as you can see, I think it went very smoothly.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Josh, anything to add as well?
I would say the only thing I would add on top of that is patience and a sense of humor, because a lot of the people you roll out to, a few of them did have kind of had an issue, whether it be, someone's using too much lotion or something like that. And it's just little small problems here and there. And then a lot of people love to make jokes. Oh, I'm scanning my finger. Let me scan my middle finger.
Yeah.
A little bit of laugh in there, and just let them continue.
Right.
Because you're going to deal with a lot of people, and they're all going to have the exact same joke.
That's very true.
Yep. That's I think that's the other part. This is one of those points when IT departments have to become almost marketing departments, because you are trying to campaign and create buzz and all those things, and maybe even gamify it. I love the experience hearing that they were like, which finger did you scan? I think that's great. But it's you're dealing with people, and so it's one of those points in time. It doesn't do a lot of service to just talk about the tech. So I love those points. I think that Kathy, the point you made to say, make sure you explain how it benefits them, is one of those key things I keep reminding customers. We do work hand in hand with customers on communications to their employees or customers as they're rolling out some of these technologies, because of that reason, really highlighting what does it mean for that person, not what does it technically mean. And so that's just such a critical part to successful MFA. And I think it's a big barrier for people to get it to all accounts, right? Not just IT admins will adopt it, but if you're trying to roll it out everywhere, you have to work with people.
Agreed. Very true.
Yeah, no, this has been great. So I've been smiling this whole time. Kathy and Josh, thank you so much for sharing this story. There are some amazing tips and tricks in here to think about as you're considering authentication, not even just biometrics, but obviously also highlighting that there are definitely use cases where biometrics make the most sense and the most security for banks, financial institutions, and honestly, a lot of different organizations out there. To wrap up, I am going to open it up for just a live Q&A in just a moment. If you're looking for more information, I definitely encourage everybody listening in to visit biokey.com to learn more about our multi-factor, our biometrics. And really, we have been at this for over 2 decades. We're more than happy to help you with your authentication program. So request a free trial or contact us to set up an authentication consult. And as Josh mentioned, we're happy to work with you to set up, and send a fingerprint scanner if you want to try out that method specifically. So I am going to open it up for questions from the audience. Just going to take a look at this. So we had a few questions submitted. So looking at the first one, so this is a pretty common question once you've deployed for employees, but are you implementing MFA with other users, so customers or third parties or suppliers?
At this point, no, we're not. It's just internal employees.
Mm-hmm.
We don't allow third party on our environment unless we're with them, so they don't have any access. From a customer perspective, we are not looking at that. It's actually handled by a third party. Our online banking environment handles that.
Perfect. Excellent. And then another question here is, what made you decide to outsource your security officer role?
It's just being a small bank, and we've had the security officer for over 4 years now. We were a smaller bank at that time as well. So we recognized pretty early on that in order to get the right expertise, we would have to significantly pay a lot more than possibly what we could afford at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And also the location that we're in, being north of New York City, we didn't know if we'd get the talent we were looking for. At that time, remote working wasn't as popular. So we really just, took a look around and talked to other peers, and others were having really a large success using a virtual information security officer. And it works for us. He's an extension of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I like having that he's here, he's one of us, but he's not. So he's like a check and balance because he's not an employee. So
Mm-hmm.
he actually adds another layer of protection to me as well. He's not as vested because he's
Right.
not an employee. So I think it really works for us.
That's a fantastic, but I've seen that trend now more and more and more. Virtual CISOs, virtual IT, and like you said, I think for a lot of those challenges of can't find the talent that you're looking for.
Right.
I love that check and balance because there's always been the challenge of who does IT report to, and then especially who does the CISO report to. So
exactly.
And whose interests are we serving here? Keeping people safe,
exactly.
or that kind of information. So. And then this question just came in also, are you using BioKey just for Active Directory login, or does this integrate to other applications? Great question, Jason.
At the moment, it's just Active Directory. There's a couple of kinks we have to work out, but we are working on the single sign-on as well for a couple of our applications that we have. Those applications they've been a little bit difficult, so it's not sitting on the BioKey side. It's actually sitting on the other side at the moment. So we're just waiting for a few things to come back, and then we're going to start implementing it. One of those things is our intranet site, because that is no longer housed internally. It's now external, and things have just been a little complex in that area. But everything is ready to go. We're just waiting for it at this point.
Yeah, that's a great question. And to echo on the BioKey side, so the platform that Orange Bank and Trust is using is called Portal Guard. It does MFA. Also, we are full IAM, so single sign-on, self-service password reset. And so definitely can integrate multiple ADs. Also can use different repositories if you have a SQL or LDAP compliant, etc. And then on the single sign-on side, Josh, you brought that up. It's usually the application that gives the challenge, not so much what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we are able to do legacy apps, which is definitely a unique thing for us. I used to call it form filling or screen scraping. We can even do that if you have, some kind of big ERP system or something that's a little bit older. So that's pretty key. Another question, so can you log into a laptop off the network not connected to the network or internet? So basically,
Funny
if
that
you're
you
off,
should ask. We do actually. I'm going to let Josh answer, but it's we have a very limited laptop user because our remote access is bring your own device. So there's probably maybe only about 15 or so laptops in our environment, if that. So I'll let Josh let you know. That's our last piece we're implementing as we speak.
Yeah, so one of our struggles on the initial setup was we did have these users that, they weren't going to have that main scanner at their desk. So try to figure out a way to get them on. So it does work off the network, whether or not they have a scanner. If you're off the network and not connected to the internet, you do need the mobile authenticator. Luckily, our laptop users are usually more management level, so they're already getting their phones paid for. So it's kind of just well, you're going to need this. It doesn't matter what you say to me. If you want to use a laptop, this is what you're going to have to use. And it works pretty well. As long as you're connected to the internet and you have it set up properly through PortalGuard, it'll actually work with the scanner. So if you have someone who has a portable scanner with them, their scanner will just work. But if they have no access at all, they're going to need the backup mobile authenticator. But it's been working pretty well, and I think we only have a couple. Those are the main people that aren't on. We have a couple of them on and working, so the rest of them is just waiting for them to come back in to get them set up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely have that request quite a bit. Also in the sense of like password recovery or lockouts, account lockouts, and those type of things. And so we have full support for the offline recovery and offline mode. And so whether it's an authenticator or a different method, there's absolutely ways so that you're not going to have somebody locked out because they're offline. That just doesn't bode well, especially like you said, where people are remote. Hey Joe, can you drive into the office?
Yeah.
We can unlock your computer. So yeah, all of that is customizable for desktop login. And then the other thing I'd highlight too is depending on where you're putting your IAM solution in general, we do offer on-prem installations of our platform, but obviously highly recommend cloud for that reason, so that if your systems go offline, everyone can still manage their identity and get access, safely, just as they were without any disruption. So, but fantastic questions. Okay. So it looks like that's all the questions we have at the moment. And so again, I cannot thank Kathy and Josh, both of you, enough. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you, getting to know your story. Just from that cyber perspective, hearing the firsthand experience of what it's like to really roll out something like this. And I think, tremendous value for everybody listening in today. And thank you also for all our attendees out there taking the time out of your day to listen in as well. So a recording will be sent out, and Kathy and Josh, thank you. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for letting us share our experience. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.